Mr. Harper, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So your new book, Right Here, Right Now, starts out with your favorite Donald Trump quote, "What the hell is going on?"
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by asking you, what is going on around the world right now?
Yeah, so maybe just, Mercedes, if I can, give you a kind of bit of perspective I wrote this from. Obviously, I'm involved in global business now. I, manage my own consulting business that does work around the world. I'm also chair of something called the IDU, which is the Global Federation of Conservative Parties. So, since I left office, beginning in 2016, we've had a series of extraordinary political events. We had Brexit, we've had the rise of Donald Trump, and you're seeing across Europe and elsewhere a rise of these so-called populist movements. And as I kind of made my way through the global worlds of business and politics, I've kind of been seeing some commonalities. And so my thesis is really the following, that in the era of globalization, which I think overall has been very successful, we had 1 billion people move out of poverty. It's mainly in Asia. But in many Western societies, not Canada, and I caution your readers, the book is, as you know, not really about Canada. But in many Western societies, we've had stagnant or even declining incomes for middle and working class people. We had that for a long time. Then we had the global financial crisis. Unlike Canada, in many countries, there were the big bailouts of the banks, the corporations, quote, the wealthy, and then slower non-growth for the rest of the population. And I think if you look back, the kind of political upheavals we're now seeing is a consequence of all that. And we shouldn't really be surprised about it. The question really is, what do we do to improve people's lives and lead to a more positive future?
So can you lay out for me, what is populism?
Well, first of all, I think populism is kind of in the eyes of the beholder. The whole theory of populism, and it really stems out of the American-Canadian Midwest, back from a century ago, is a political movement that tries to represent the views of the mass of the people as opposed to the views of, quote, elites. So populism varies with the times, but I think what the movement is today, it is essentially, in many countries, a revolt of the mass of the people who don't identify with the views of big institutions, be they governments or corporations or media or entertainment industry, representing the mass of the people, challenging established assumptions about globalization, immigration, markets, trade, etc.
Do you think we're immune to it? Because I think of Maxime Bernier, I think of the election in New Brunswick. Is it that we've just avoided it so far, or is there something unique in Canada that means it won't catch hold? No,
I think we're not immune to it at all. Look, I think there are many wonderful, strong characteristics of our country. But, if we have a situation where large numbers of people are doing very badly and they feel that government ignores them or even despises them, then you could potentially have that kind of populist upheaval. I don't see that today. Obviously there's changes in government in Canada, and that change in government right now is coming from, for the most part, the conventional right of center, which I'm encouraged about.
You talk about anywheres and somewheres in your book. Who are those people?
So this is not a term that I invented. I'm not trying to claim in the book that everything is original. But there is an analyst who's used this, and he really describes the fact that in the era of globalization, there's come to be a class of people whose lives are really international. So those people he calls the anywheres, whereas people traditionally, people who live within boundaries, who live within their communities, who are in traditional occupations, who travel only for vacation, he calls those the somewheres, who are the bulk of the population. And one of the things I say in the book is that I think if you look at political debate, the framing of political debate, the framing of most media coverage, commentary, frankly, a lot of it is framed from the perspective of the so-called anywheres, who are a tiny percentage of the population.
Well, one of the things you say in the book is Donald Trump, you don't consider him to be particularly conservative, but that you believe if those grievances aren't dealt with, you'll get something much worse. What does that look like?
I say that the Donald Trumps of the world, the Nigel Farages of the world, one can disagree with them, especially a conservative like myself can disagree with them on some things, but they are at least trying to fix what they see ails democratic, capitalist, market-oriented societies. And my fear is if they don't have success, or if conservatives do not adapt to the political pressures that are driving these movements, my concern is we will have the left-wing version of that, which will be anti-market, which will be for socialist or Marxist economics, which I believe would turn us in an irreversible downturn direction. The kind of global pressures the West faces today, the economic pressures many people are facing, a return to that kind of economic program would be, in my view, absolutely disastrous and probably irrecoverable. So I look at Donald Trump, obviously there's things that I'm uncomfortable with, but the Bernie Sanders of the world or the Jeremy Corbyns in Britain are the ones that really, really frighten me.
So why do you think that left-wing populists are more dangerous than right-wing populists?
Because of their economic agendas, fundamentally. The market economy, as I talk in the book, is not perfect. It has to be well-governed, well-regulated. Market policies have to be selected carefully. But anti-market policies in an age of global competition would be ruinous to our economies.
We've just come out of this renegotiation of NAFTA to USMCA, and you raise a lot of concerns about China. Why do you think we need to be concerned about China?
Because I believe that the imbalances with China are a very serious problem. As I say in the book, as you know, I'm an economist by training, and a lot of economists will say the fact that we have a deficit with China doesn't matter, and no form of protectionism can possibly work. Look, those who say that trade deficits or trade surpluses don't matter and protectionism can never work forgot to tell the Chinese, because the Chinese are building their economy through a policy of deliberate trade surplus and domestic protection at home. And the situation we have got is that the Chinese have wide-ranging access to North American, European, to Western markets. But the fact is our access to the Chinese market is still very difficult.
And that's part of what you argue is driving this populism. So I have to ask you, there's this interesting chapter in the USMCA that requires notification if you want to do a trade deal with someone like China. Is that the kind of approach that is helpful in trying to deal with this problem?
Look, I think it's very interesting in that I think it's, as I've said, I think it's an opportunity for both Canada and Mexico to work with the United States on dealing with access to the Chinese market. We don't want protectionism. We want to see greater access both ways. And we haven't had the kind of access to the Chinese market we need, and all three countries are suffering from growing trade imbalances with China. So I think this is an opportunity for our government to work with the United States, frankly, on something that we could not do on our own. I think it would be very difficult for Canada alone to try and fix that structural trade imbalance problem.
Mr. Harper, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.